those who facilitate terrorism and those who encourage others to become terrorists by changing the environment in which extremists and those who radicalize others can operate. And I'll talk later about specific examples, what I mean by changing the environment. And 3, engaging in the battle of ideas by challenging the ideologies that extremists believe can justify the use of violence. And primarily this is through working through Muslims who wish to dispute these ideas. And I'll start with the last of these 3, the challenging the ideologies. Because it's vital to understand and tackle the root causes, to take on the poisonous arguments and unpick the distorted ideas that violent extremists peddle. These arguments have been around for some time. Al-Qaeda were busy long before 11th of September or 7th of July, but their methods over time have grown increasingly sophisticated and continue to evolve. Al-Qaeda and others use slick media campaigns. They reach out through the internet. They target young men, as I've said, with a significant number in their teens. They look for ungoverned spaces. We need to know where they're peddling this message, where they can approach the vulnerable. These are not nowadays not so much mosques, places like cafes, bookshops, and gyms. The process of radicalization can be rapid. In some cases, people are isolated from their family and friends, indoctrinated and manipulated within a matter of months. And as the violent extremist methods adapt, so must our response, informed by a new and better understanding of the challenge. So to start with one specific program that we've established in the UK, and this is the Scholars Roadshow. Following the London attacks, the Home Office, that's our equivalent of the Department of Homeland Security, set up 7 community-led working groups to develop proposals to tackle extremism. They set out 64 recommendations, suggesting further debate between young British Muslims and international scholars with credibility and influence. So we set up a Scholars Roadshow in cooperation with the Coalition of British Muslim Organisations, a federation of student Islamic societies, the Young Muslim Organisation, Q News, to bring these international figures to the UK to speak out against extremist interpretations of Islam at public meetings. This programme is run by a group called the Radical Middle Way, and they have their own website, and I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's a fiercely independent group, despite having come out of a dialogue sponsored by government. It's inclusive, intellectual movement, and it's aimed at articulating a relevant mainstream understanding of Islam, and particularly for young people. The other area I mentioned is changing the environment in which extremists and those radicalizing others can operate. So I'll give another example of activity in this area. In April 2007, the UK government announced a Pathfinder scheme with local authorities, distributing in the first year £6 million to support community-led projects. About 200 projects have already been agreed and are up and running. Nearly 80 of those are in London. And they have some imaginative ideas about what can be done to give communities the confidence and skills they need to take on hateful messages and to support vulnerable young people. I'll give 3 examples. One in Tower Hamlets, it's a very underprivileged part of East London. They're putting together a video they've called Tag TV, and it's young people's views about faith and identity, how they can be both proud to be Muslim and proud to be British. In Birmingham, the second largest city in the UK, the council is working together with the community to develop, that's the city council, an accredited programme for imams who are employed in the city to help them to deliver sermons in English, reach out to young people more effectively, and help them to develop the skills they need to tackle the ideology of violent extremists. And in Reading, just west of London, a series of roadshows have given people from across the community a chance to debate the issues, to meet people from the local authority and the police. The police also have a role to play, and to discuss how best to work together so that there is no room for hateful messages. That £6 million last year is just the start. The UK government will provide £45 million over the next 3 years to these kinds of local partnerships. So that's by 2010-11 support will rise to about £18 million a year, triple what it is today. So that will help us to do more. We also need to work smarter. We're developing a framework of minimum standards for public institutions, engaging imams working with the young and the vulnerable in places like prisons, hospitals and universities, and ensure that these key figures have the understanding, skills and capacity to work with young people and to isolate extremists. And this vital work can make sure that there is absolutely no place in tomorrow's communities for those who seek to divide us. And finally, on this topic of changing the environment, we want to make sure that we get much better at unlocking the potential of Muslim women. Their voice often goes unheard, despite the fact that their role as leaders in their families and communities gives them a unique perspective on the challenges we face and a unique position to get things done. At a national level, the UK government is setting up a group of Muslim women to give expert advice on how best we can support them to be ambassadors and role models for the community. One example, the Muslimah Project runs workshops that look at historic and modern-day role models, women who have spoken out and made a difference to the world around them. The workshops also explore through Islamic principles how Muslim women could and should play a positive role in wider British society. So I hope that gives, it's a quick run-through, but a broad outline of how the UK government is tackling this issue in our communities and with our communities of radicalisation, and how we can try and prevent young men, because it is mostly young men, from falling into the clutches of those who would try and turn them down the path of violent extremism. I'd like to conclude today by describing one specific project which brings it a little bit closer to home, back to my new adopted home, to Houston, and a project which links Houston to the UK. Because although we're running these programs in the UK, we also need to learn from other societies about what they have been doing and to share best practice. In November last year, the British Consulate General in Houston took a delegation of Muslim leaders to the UK for a series of briefings in London, Birmingham, and Dudley, just outside Birmingham. From Houston specifically, we took Councilman M.J. Khan and Houston's Crescent Youth founder, Sharik Ghani. In addition, we took the Secretary General of the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, Dr. Munir Farid, and 2 other youth program directors completed the delegation. The purpose of this visit was to identify and exchange best practice between community leaders involved in youth programs that addressed radicalisation. Briefings ranged from government offices, my office, the Foreign Office, the Department of Communities and Local Government, the Radical Middle Way, who I mentioned earlier, other local community organisations such as the Green Light Centre in Dudley, Birmingham City Council, the British Muslim Forum, and schools and mosques and others. And if you need to know more about this programme, Mitch Jeffrey, the Press and Public Affairs Officer, is sitting over here at this table from our consulate. What the group learned and shared included, one, both nations are seeking to reach young Muslim leaders and establish a moderate, credible voice that they will respect. So the Radical Middle Way, for example, in the UK, has gone beyond speeches and lectures and is pushing a much more aggressive new media, youth-friendly content, including popular music alongside moderate teachings, and doing this through websites and through podcasts and so on, as well as just speeches. Several of the organisations on both sides realised that their constituent youth were dealing more with, or as much with, common societal issues like drugs and gangs and personal relationships as they were with radicalisation. So youth leaders need training in multiple areas. You have to address a number of different areas at one go. The US approach tends to use national youth conferences. The UK approach is much more community-driven, with local organisations developing programmes to meet specific needs. And one interesting thing for us in the UK, the US makes much better use, in my view, of interfaith programmes, including the Interfaith Institute at the University of Houston, which has